Hello, and huge welcome to the Ywk Podcast. Thank you for listening and for tuning in today. You'll notice if you're watching on video that I'm joined today by our OG Series 1 co-host, Olly Shaw.
Hi.
Today we are talking about, has youth work changed since we were young people, and if so, how? So we're going to start off by unpacking a little bit about what youth work was like for us as teenagers. Do you want to go first, Olly, or shall I go first?
Yeah, I don't mind. I'm happy. I can go first. Youth work for me. I grew up in a place called Rugby, and there was quite a good Christian youth work scene there. So the head of Youth for Christ at the time lived in Rugby. We had a really strong Youth for Christ Rugby, headed up by a guy called Ian Bruce. And then there was an evangelical church that is in our town that had a really strong youth work and youth worker. And then the Anglican church also had a really strong youth work. And I kind of flitted around those a bit and experienced all the different youth ministries that they had. It was very much less risk assessment, way kind of riskier stuff. So the youth worker from the evangelical church took us on a survival weekend because he'd done some survival training. I mean, this guy could climb mountains in Everest, so he was a hardcore guy, but he took us on a survival weekend. I don't think there was a consent form. We loaded up into the minibus and didn't have any food, and realized very quickly that we wouldn't survive if we'd been left on our own. We tried to hunt a deer, and we were chasing it with sharpened sticks. And we realized actually at the end that it was someone's dog, and they were dog walking through the woods we were in. So we all hit the floor and panicked. Yeah, so that's what it was. Definitely laissez-faire in the kind of safeguarding way, but lots of really good relational stuff. And we had a midweek Bible study games type thing with the Anglican church, which was really good. And Sunday morning youth work. That was my youth work experience.
Cool.
How about yours?
So I'm thinking back. So we started going to church. My mum and dad became Christians and started going to church before I was born. So I was part of kids work as well, and kids work at our church I remember being quite a well done production. Our church building had a secondary school right next door, so we used to go in there for kids work, and they used to use like the stage which had curtains and everything. They started off with their Addams Family tune, with everyone like clicking their fingers to the Addams Family theme tune. And then there was like a drama performance by some of the kids leaders, and then we'd break off into smaller age groups to go into classrooms to do like some other stuff. And then our family stopped going to church for a bit. We moved house, and then a friend that I met in our street was going to the same church that we used to go to, and she was like, "Oh, why don't you come back? Like, I'm part of the youth work there." So we started going back to the church through her, really, and then that's when I became involved in the youth work. And the youth work was in a dilapidated old chapel that the church used to be in before it outgrew it, but there was mice in there and loads of cobwebs and dust. But the youth work, I remember being equally high production value. Like they used to run a weekend youth session called the Boiler Room, which had smoke, lights, a live band, all the cool stuff. And they had loads of props, signs that they'd painted, and ammo netting, and loads of stuff that made the space just look really cool for young people. And I remember thinking I wanted to be a part of that even before I knew that my friend was going back to the church there. But then when I started, a new youth worker came on board, and the Sunday stuff changed slightly. So it was called Remix, and we were in smaller pods, kind of cell groups, and by age group. But my group ended up being a mix of years. I think they didn't quite have enough young people to be like in one, or they'd like got our ages wrong and not really figured out that we were in different year groups and thought we were in the same year group. So I was with some kids who were like a year older than me, But there was a few of us, we're part of the same year, who were in this older group, and we were thinking, we hope they don't find out, because we like being with these older kids.
The cool kids.
Yeah. But I remember all these little groups in different parts of the building, and we were in the room that used to be the office of the vicar, and it had a little kitchenette in the corner, and it had some donated old crusty sofas in there. That were really old, and there were mice in the room, and every Sunday when we went in there, it was like, oh, we're going to see a mouse today, or like, we're going to find carcasses of dead mice around the room. They'd like run out from under the sofa and like scare us and stuff. I remember they let us paint the room, and they were like, well, the girls can pick a colour and the boys can pick a colour, and we'll do like a half and half. Bottom half of the wall can be one colour and the top half can be another. And I remember the girls picked lilac and the boys picked orange, bright orange. So this room ended up being painted from the floor halfway up orange, and then halfway up to the ceiling lilac purple. So it was like a crazy combo of colours. But our youth leaders were volunteers. They used to take us away to different places. So we'd go to Norfolk for little short breaks. I remember there was another volunteer who used to take us to Brighton for the day. So we'd go on the train to Brighton, a little group of us. I just remember they really invested in us. At the time, I didn't realise how much, but they had families of their own. They were volunteers, but they were there every week, in and out for us, and would give up their weekends to take us away and their Saturdays to take us to Brighton on the train. And we just had loads of adventures. And I just remember thinking back to that time, just how consistent they were with us and how much that meant. Because I had quite a difficult time at school. And I remember that just being part of the church youth group was the light in my life. I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't had it. That friendship group and that just different connections with people, and obviously getting to understand different things about who God was and what the Bible said, and all of that was a plus as well. I absolutely hated school as a teenager. I was bullied and just had an awful time at school. And so school was definitely not a safe place for me. So I definitely needed somewhere else that was. And I'm just, really thankful that I had that youth group to be part of. That was that for me.
Yeah. That's really...
But what matters to us back then, and what do we think matters to young people now? And do we think those things are different or the same?
So I think what you were saying there about the volunteers who invested in you, I mean, it sounds like our youth work was different in lots of ways and similar in lots of ways, but the things that I really remember, I mean, there were loads of people, but so employed youth workers who really invested in me. There was Ian Bruce, Alan Stapleton and John Mills, and these guys were all very different, and they had different lives at home, and they had different priorities and different ways that they showed love, but actually they all invested in me. And I was annoying and kind of needy because I had a lot of stuff going on at home. I felt like they saw me. And there's a lady called Joan Mogg, who was an amazing volunteer, who hosted the Anglican church. And again, you went and she was like, oh, hi, we'd love to have you here. It doesn't matter what's going on in the background. It doesn't matter if you click or not with the people here, but we want you and we're glad you're here. And I think that's, for lots of the time, was what made me stay involved with the youth work that I was in. So I'd go and help at Youth for Christ stuff. I'd go to a midweek group with the evangelical church, and then I'd go to a midweek group and a Sunday group with the Anglican church. And all of that, I think the consistency of the adults provided security, because you had like flaky young people, you had consistent young people, you had consistent young people you didn't like, you had consistent young people who didn't like you, that all of that changed around, but the adults who were kind of representing God's love to us stayed stable. I think that's the thing I remember. I remember some of the games, I remember some of the things I learnt, I remember some of the silly anecdotal stories, but the bit that lasted was those adults who cared for us, invested in us, and went just that little bit extra. So they were there on the actual day, but they'd ask you about stuff that had happened in life. They'd be praying for you. actually care if you weren't there and that kind of stuff. I think that made a big difference. I don't know if that was
Yeah.
the same for you.
Yeah, I think as well for us, when that new youth work started, they had a proper vision for the youth work. So they brought on another youth leader as well. So there was 2 paid youth workers, and they had this massive vision for turning that old chapel into a purpose-built youth centre. So we did a massive fundraiser as a church. I think they raised, at the time, I think it cost like 150,000 to refurbish the whole building. So they put an upstairs in, they put a lift in, the whole place was recarpeted, refurbished. They got rid of all the mice, all the cobwebs, put in central heating so it wasn't those over the head, like burn the top of your head heaters that you get in some old churches. And just that in itself, I think, meant a lot to us. We kind of felt like, oh, our church wants to invest in young people. Like that matters a lot to them. And that made us feel like we mattered. And looking back, I guess some of that we took for granted a little bit. The fact that we then had, once it was all done, we then had a place to call our own that was sort of separate from the church, but still part of it in many ways. But yeah, just remember they had a full programme of stuff then. So we had a Sunday evening youth service called Elbow Room, and it was really popular. So there literally was hardly any elbow room to be had because the room was full of young people. There's probably 100 something young people there every Sunday evening. Like it was so popular, and like young people came because they felt like they mattered and there was something there like to be part of and that meant something, and they felt like they meant something to that place.
Yeah, and I think what you were saying about vision as well, actually, all those people I mentioned, the employed people and the volunteer lady, of which there were loads of other volunteers, but those ones all had a vision for why they were doing the youth work. And that's why they were investing in people in a particular way. And those visions were all different. Ian was very strong on kind of evangelism and discipleship. Alan was really strong on building community, and he was really, really good at that. John was good at fun and taking God seriously, and that kind of balance between the two. And that was baked into the way youth work was happening. And I think you're right. If you don't have that vision, then really you just invest in the young people you like, I think. Like, whereas if there's a bigger vision for why we're doing this, it's much easier to actually, whatever it is, whatever your vision is, whatever you're trying to build, it helps when you're to be relational then, because you're like, this is where I'm taking the young people. This is what I want to give them.
Yeah, definitely. I just thinking back as well about how youth work has changed. Like the risk assessment thing is definitely one, but also I feel like we used to do loads more gross challenges than we would probably get away with today, like drinking baked beans through somebody else's sock.
Yeah.
Or
I think young people have got wimpier, because we used to do Kiss the Fish, which was grim. John bought a fish and it was like pass the parcel, but it was a dead fish from fishmongers. And it passed the parcel. When it stopped on you, you had to kiss the fish. And I was like, this is weird and gross. Like, I don't want to do that. But, that was the game. And so we did it. And then even when I was a youth worker, early doors, we used to do messy games where people would be putting their foot in a thing of baked beans and crawling through jelly. And the kids were well up for it and were like, yeah, let's go. Oh, this is fun. You'd have the wimpy ones, but like the general atmosphere was, oh, this is fun. We don't get to do this at home. And then even in the years I was a youth worker, you're like, oh man, it's got so, they don't want to do anything even a bit uncomfortable. Never mind gross.
And those kind of games, be fed yogurt or mousse from a blindfolded person, and it would like get all over your face and all over your clothes. And
or with a really long, we did it with like a really long spoon attached to a bamboo cane, and like you'd end up getting jabbed in the back of the throat because they didn't have any control.
Or like people would get gunged. I remember that was a thing too.
That was very 90s.
Yeah, that was a very 90s thing anyway. Like if you remember back to like kids and youth TV, that was a very going live 90s thing, wasn't it? For people to get gunged and for it to be entertaining for young people to watch.
Yeah, they still do that in New Wine Kids Work. My kids were there and they were loving the fact that each time a leader would get gunged and you could vote for the leader. Some of it's a bit timeless, but
Yeah.
even now coming back into youth work after a couple of years out, and I've obviously not helped build the culture and things, but we used to play Move Round If, where you say a characteristic, you move around, you end up sitting on someone's lap. And you say like ridiculous things like, oh, if you've had a shower, if you fancy someone who's here, as in if you've had a shower today, and then you joke like, oh, they haven't had a shower. And like, oh, you fancy someone in this room. Oh, who is it? And you'd move around and you'd end up sitting on each other's lap and pile up. And again, over the years I was doing youth work, increasingly the young people weren't enjoying it. So it wasn't even, you kind of cajole them and they'd be like, oh, this is fun and a bit weird and a bit cringe. And then now helping here in this church, I would never play that game with them because they actually wouldn't enjoy it. Like, it's not that I could cajole them and get them going. They would do it maybe, but would not have a fun time, and which is different, I think.
Is there anything else that we think matters to young people now? I think the same things matter. The consistency thing, feeling a part of something. That's why young people come along to things. Like, they want to feel like they matter. They want to feel like they're part of something. I guess the different thing about young people now is that they don't just want to be there and watch something. They want to participate in it, which I think is different. It's not just a spectator sport. They're not just coming to consume, but they want those opportunities to participate and be involved in it, and to be involved in making it.
Do you think that's because the bar for what is good that you can watch has got so much higher with things like YouTube and the internet and access to streaming services? Whereas with your curtains and camo netting, when you were in your group, that's so cool. You don't see that anywhere. Whereas now, if you want to watch that kind of thing, you can just, you can literally find anything. So,
yeah, I wonder as well whether it's because now they have more control over what they watch, and they're making their own content for TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. Now they get to interact in ways with those things that we didn't. So they can't differentiate between the places you can and can't do that. They just want to do that everywhere.
Yeah.
Whereas back in our day, we only had 5 TV channels. If you had Sky or cable TV, you watched MTV that was curated for you. There wasn't the choice to search for music videos that you liked. You just had to watch whatever was there. Whereas now there is a lot more on-demand culture, isn't there, for being able to choose what it is that you're being part of.
Yeah. And I think that something that hasn't changed is that people like shared experience and belonging to something. But actually, that's a thing we can offer that's a bit unique, but you can't piggyback anymore off joint shared experience that everyone is doing. So, even watching the World Cup's on at the moment. Growing up, I didn't particularly like football, but I was watching the World Cup, and you could assume that everyone was watching the World Cup and cheering for England. Whereas now, that's not necessarily the case. And people aren't embarrassed to admit that either. They're happy to say, I don't like football, so I don't watch it. So there is that kind of slightly siloed interest,
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, everyone's gone to watch that one film and you can talk about that and bond over that. I think we need to be a bit more creative on what is our shared purpose. How do we create that ourselves within this group? You can't really rely on, I really love Marvel films. There was a time where everyone was watching Marvel films. I mean, people don't anymore, but there isn't really that thing that everyone watches, or Harry Potter, or...
Yeah, I hear you. I think some of the issues teenagers face, like, in some ways they're different. Obviously, we're in a very different place than when we grew up in terms of technology. Mobile phones became a thing like midway through secondary school for me, and I didn't get one till I was 16. Friends of mine had them like year 10, 11. They had the Nokia the Nokia one that you could
The
change the
Nokia
covers on.
3310.
Yeah,
Oh,
and people were playing Snake in school and they shouldn't have been. But they were just becoming a thing. And they just did phone, or text messages, but you had to fit within a certain number of characters.
Yeah. Little X on the end was really valuable.
Yes.
If you really like the person, you put the X.
Or you were taking out vowels from the sentence to hope that your friend would
how
understand.
Many words you could mush together.
Yeah. And you paid per text message that you sent. Yeah. So you definitely wanted to make your money's worth. Whereas now technology's moved on so much that young people can do everything on their phones. They can access everything. There's obviously the whole social media ban coming in for young people under 16, which I think
that'd be interesting.
Yeah, which I think will have a big impact on the kids that are growing up now. Like our kids, when they become teenagers, they won't have such a dependency on it. And I think some of those underlying negatives about it will be more prevalent, because they'll need to be understood as to why those things are not allowed. Like we all knew when we were teenagers that drinking underage was a bad thing, but I think it will have a big impact because at the minute there is no control, obviously, and there is no blanket understanding of why it's a negative thing. I think that will creep in more, the longer the ban is in place and the longer that's there for young people who are growing up now, who aren't yet teenagers. It'll be interesting to see how that has an impact on young people.
Especially because I think, like you, generally it'll be a good thing for kids the age our kids are, because they'll have the experience like we had, where you grow up without it and then you learn how to engage with it when your brain is more developed and stuff. But for the kids who are 14 now and have been through it and their whole life has been centered around social media, and suddenly they're not legally able to access it anymore. There are kids whose only friends are online. And that's going to be quite isolated for them, I think. But I guess I see it a bit like the smoking ban came in. You couldn't smoke indoors. And that was fine for people who didn't smoke and good for young people who hadn't taken it on. But there were those people who were used to smoking indoors and now they had to go outside to smoke, and it was really annoying.
They had a harder transition to make.
I
think it would definitely be a harder transition for those who are teenagers now and those who are just about to become teenagers in the next couple of years. It'll be harder for them.
So that'll be a thing that people have to deal with. That wasn't a thing when we were young people and wasn't even a thing when I was doing youth work full time.
Thinking back to technology and how that's changed, obviously dial-up internet became a thing as well for us. We weren't connected all the time. You had to wait for your internet to connect and wait for those beeps to make your line connected to the internet.
And wait for people to not be on the phone.
Yeah, sometimes it just wouldn't connect. Be there trying to dial up the internet, and it would be trying to connect. There's been an error, and it just would not connect. So then you had no choice but to go and do something else. But even then, we could do on there was restricted. We didn't have Google. We were learning stuff from Encarta 95 and online encyclopedias. And even then, we had some level of being able to talk to other people. We were on MSN and we were connecting with people online, but they tended to be people who we knew in real life. It was just a different way of talking to them and being connected. But obviously all of that has changed now, and in some ways for the better and in some ways for the worst, in terms of cyberbullying and young people not being able to escape some of those negative things that being connected brings with it. You can't disconnect in the same way that we could. It's a lot harder to do that.
And actually, you're saying things that haven't changed. That timeless thing of a community that you belong to, that was important for our church youth experience. I think, suddenly has always been important, becomes even more important when a community is taken away from you, whether that's online or whether you stop playing a sports team or whatever, where you lose a community. Suddenly your church, or for you at school, where school was a horrible time, suddenly that church community and the consistency of it, as a young person, you start to think, oh yeah, this is good. This is valuable. I see why this is a good thing.
Yeah, and that's what people are saying, aren't they? With the rise of AI and young people becoming friends with AI bots, they will never understand you as a person, no matter how much they appear to. And online community will never be as meaningful as the face-to-face connections with people. And so, it'd be easy for us to think, oh, well, technology allows these things, so let's do it that way instead. But I think for us, as the church and as people trying to connect, Christians trying to connect with children and young people, like those in-person connections are still going to be the ones that are going to matter the most. And we're sort of battling against the online options of those in many ways. But I feel like we always need to be keeping to offer those in-person connections because they're so much more meaningful. There's opportunities to use technology to do some of those things, but we need to not forget that in-person connection is as important as it is, and being part of real life face-to-face community can't be replaced by AI bots or
No,
online community.
but it is harder. As in, the nice thing about an AI bot is it doesn't challenge you at all. It doesn't. It shapes itself around you, so it becomes very you centric. Online community, you can opt in and out in a way that if you're actually physically in a room, you can't, and so it demands more of you. And actually, that it's a skill that we teach people by gathering together as a community. How you do that, how you interact, how you stick around when it's uncomfortable and painful, and how you work through issues and stuff. Yeah, I think the value comes with a cost.
Yeah, definitely. I think thinking about as well what issues young people face and how those are different or the same. Young people will always face those identity questions of who am I, where do I belong, where do I fit in, what skills do I have to offer, and what am I supposed to do with this life? I think young people will always ask those questions. I guess the difference today is that there's more places to find those answers, and the answers they can find online, they can appear to be good, but in reality, they're not. The stats are saying that young people today are a lot more interested in exploring the spiritual stuff, but there are so many more avenues now for them to explore, witchcraft and crystals, and there's so much more online that they can access that they think will meet that need, when in reality, we know that there isn't anything like Jesus Christ and there is no match to that. So it's trying to meet them where they're at within that journey of trying to figure out the spiritual stuff, to say, hey, this is what I believe in. Here's something that is different.
Yeah, and part of what makes it different is it's not so tailored. Youth ministry is tailored towards young people, but online algorithms are tailored towards individuals. So if you're searching for spirituality, what you find online will be totally tailored to you and much more palatable, much more what you want to hear. Again, no challenge. Whereas, again, real life, being part of a church and a church community and learning together and striving towards God, all of that's a bit messier and a bit less tailored. And I even saw a thing online this morning that was like, oh, if you want to be a Christian and you like Jesus, but you don't like Paul, here's the kind of church for you. I'm like, that's so niche. Like, what a weird thing to be advertising. But there's loads of stuff like that that's totally like so granular and targeted. And actually what we're offering it can't be, because if we've got a youth of 10, that's 10 people for whom it's got to meet a need and be applicable for and be loving towards and appealing with. And that's if there's 10. If you've got a youth work of 50, or, it can't be tailored to just one person.
What opportunities do you think there are for youth and kids leaders to get alongside children and young people in meaningful ways?
I think they've always stayed the same. Young people are in a vulnerable place because they're growing up and developing, and there's that opportunity to be an external person who's not part of your family, who stands alongside you, journeys with you, supports you. The social media ban, for example, that's going to hit some young people. It's hard, but it's an opportunity the church can step into, and we're good at community, or we should be, and it's an opportunity we can meet the need.
I think as well, understanding how young people today are very similar in lots of ways, but also there are differences in that young people are more open. I think sometimes we think back to our own experience for us as teenagers, where I know at school I felt not ashamed to be a Christian, but it was something I kept quiet because I felt like people would take the mickey out of me and wouldn't understand it, and people were less open, and there was the whole rise of atheism, and being a Christian was seen as a weird thing. Whereas I feel like today it's not so much. Young people are much more open to spirituality and to people having their own opinion. And so there is more opportunity for us to help young people and children to explore that for themselves. And they're less closed off, I think, than they were perhaps when we were growing up. I don't think culture has quite accepted Christianity yet. But I remember there was this whole storyline, EastEnders storyline when I was a teenager. There was a character called Sarah, and like on the show, she was called a Bible basher. That just gave fuel for the fire for young people to call other Christians that. Whereas I feel like that sort of language and storyline doesn't happen as much in a negative way. I feel like young people who have different opinions and beliefs, I feel like we're a lot more accepting of people. But in a lot of ways, people are a lot more divided as well. So it's like a two-sided coin.
But I guess an opportunity there as well is that I think it still is, unless it's moved on again. But like at the moment, it's seen as a good thing if you're a bit weird and a bit different and not like everyone else.
Yeah.
Whereas when I was growing up, that was not a good thing.
You had to
You could
conform.
be different. Yeah. You could be a skater or a chav or whatever, but like there were brackets that you had to conform to. And if you didn't fit between neatly in one of those kind of groups, whatever they were, or a goth or a grebo or whatever, that wasn't acceptable. There were acceptable things to be weird in, whereas that totally has now broadened out.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's an opportunity.
Totally. Yeah, I feel like back then we weren't free to express ourselves as individuals as much as young people are now. So it wasn't okay then to have an opinion that was different to everybody else, whereas that is a lot more accepted now. And most young people would say that there's unique things about everybody in their class or friendship group, whereas I feel like we weren't allowed to have those unique things, so we suppressed that or just conformed to all be the same in more ways.
Yeah, and hide any particular interest that you had that didn't fit with the group. Yeah. I think that's an opportunity, because a lot of youth work when I was a youth was almost trying to normalize Christianity and make it seem normal and fit in.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't really think we need to bother with that anymore as a church. I think people know it's unusual, and that's a good thing. As long as it's weird for the right reasons. If we're weirdly known as being super oppressive or super aggressive or closed-minded or those kind of things, then that might be a bad thing.
Yeah, you do you. Whereas we weren't allowed to do that before. Any other opportunities we can think of?
As in different to what has always existed? New opportunities for this kind of generation?
Based on the context that we're in now, are there more opportunities or less, or different opportunities, do we think?
Yeah, I think it's just different, but maybe that's just my worldview. I think, stuff stays the same. It comes round in circles, and I guess I would have been guilty of it. and I'm sure people will be guilty of it in the future, but you hear people kind of coming out with these edgy new youth work idea things, and you're like,
Yeah.
we were doing that 10 years ago. That's not a big deal. Or like, I did that as a youth.
Yeah.
Like, that's not new. It's fine, but it's not new.
I just thought of something else that was changed as well. I think obviously over the last 25 years, like thinking back to when I was a young person, like there were more opportunities to be part of youth groups that weren't just church. So there was council run youth clubs, and there was a lot more different things you could choose from. Like our council even ran summer holidays thing. It was like called Splash. There was like activities every week of the summer holidays, stuff you could sign up to and be part of. And like I was part of that, and it was just more things. Whereas a lot of council funding obviously got pulled, and there are less opportunities that a council run, but also less opportunities. Lots of charities have struggled over the last few years. Church youth work and kids work often is the only thing. So I think there's a massive opportunity there for churches to look at what else there is in their community that happens for families and children and young people. And in some places, like if they don't offer something, there is nothing. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. Young people, we know they want to be part of something. Same with young mums and same with children. They want to be part of something. And if there's nothing, they don't have any choice. But if you're running something that gives them that opportunity, then all the better for it.
Yeah, and I guess it's not a good thing, but obviously economic pressure, all of the stuff that you do now as a young person, you kind of have to pay for. So you've got the online stuff, some of it's free and paid for by advertising, but any in-person stuff is expensive. And that's fine while most families have got quite a bit of money. But actually, the church is usually uniquely free.
Yeah.
We used to charge £1 for our Friday night youth club that was open access. And we only charged £1 just so that people valued the things that were there. Whereas, now if you want to go to any sort of thing, you're paying more than £5 a time, which is a lot of money.
Yeah, there are lots of activities out there, aren't there? There's dance classes, there's drama clubs, there's karate, there's a whole range of things that young people can do. But a lot of those are, as you say, they're businesses, they cost money, and there's a transactional element of that. They want you to be there because they need you to be there because they want to make money, not because they think that you matter. Yeah. Although for some of them, I'm sure there's multiple layers.
But the church, it doesn't really generate any money. So it makes it harder for churches to invest in it. Sometimes you might get parents coming to your church and that raises more money. But generally it's a cost that people bear because they have a vision for children and youth work. But that comes with an opportunity because it's not financially sustaining itself. So we don't need to charge. And also, like we said before, all of those groups that you pay for are kind of common interest groups. Whereas the church represents something, it should represent something that's less niche.
Yeah. Any other advice or encouragement you'd give for youth and kids leaders listening?
Keep going. It is amazing. We are reflecting back on when we were young people, and you don't always see the value that you're adding to these young people's lives day in, day out. I never think it feels as good as what you're actually doing. So just that encouragement, really.
It's a slog, isn't it? Youth and kids work at times, and it feels like hard work. We don't always see the fruit of that. Like even young people come into faith or knowing that what we're doing is meaningful to them. For us as adults to be recalling leaders who were in our lives over 25 years ago, and like things that we can remember that are meaningful to us, those leaders probably will never be aware of that. So stick at stuff, be consistent. Even if you're not seeing the fruit of what you're doing, there is fruit and it is meaningful, and you are making a difference to children and young people's lives, even if you don't see that.
Things are timeless. a lot of what we said were totally timeless. So if you don't feel like you've got your finger on the pulse of culture and you're not meeting all the specific needs, I don't think any of us are. And the stuff that lasts, lots of it is timeless.
Yeah, you don't need to understand the latest game or the latest craze or the latest thing that young people are talking about. Like if you do want to, you can ask them and they won't think you're stupid or outdated. They're keen to talk about the stuff they care about. We can ask and they'll explain. But you don't need to understand all that stuff to understand them. At the core, young people still care about the same things as we did when each of us were young people. Yeah, well, thank you for joining us today for our chat about
Nice to be here.
how youth work has changed over the years. I think our consensus is in some ways it has and in some ways it hasn't.
Yeah, profound.
Yeah.
Has a bit, hasn't a bit. Keep going.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Thanks to everybody else who has tuned in and has listened. We hope you found this episode useful and inspiring. Maybe we've taken you on a trip down memory lane to remember what youth work was like for you growing up. Maybe there's somebody that you can remember as well that was really influential, meaningful for you as a teenager. I think recalling that gives us more fuel for being involved in the lives of children and young people. We understand that it's meaningful. We're cheering you on in all you do for kids and youth and in your faith journey as well. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe the podcast. It helps you find us again and helps other people connect with us. Obviously, find Ywk Plus on socials as well. If you're not following us, follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We're on LinkedIn as well. And do contact us if you want to find out something. If you want to have a chat, we'd love to hear from you and connect in with you. There's lots of other ways we can support you as well, with online resource library, with encouragements and stuff through social media, with training, with advice, consultancy, and more podcast episodes like this, trying to help you, equip you for youth and children's and family ministry. So yeah, do connect in with us. But I think that's it from us. Any last thoughts from you, Olly?
No. None at all.
Just a goodbye. Just a goodbye from
goodbye.
us. Goodbye. Catch you on the next one.